Well, hello, folks. Welcome to episode number 3. Shama, who would have thought that this would have lasted all of 3 episodes?
I know, right? It's becoming an establishment, Dave. Growing
So,
up.
we're hoping to get about 10 episodes out of this sort of first series, this first season, see how it goes. So we're getting there. We're nearly a third of the way through. So. What have you been up to? It's about 3 weeks ago, I think, since we did the last show. What have you been up to since then?
Oh my God, what have I not been up to? I just feel like I haven't been in one place for longer than a day, and that's today, basically. I have been all over the UK. I've been to Manchester as part of something called Womex, which is all about music and essentially selling your wares to the right people. I don't know if that makes sense. But, musicians come together, festivals come together, institutions that put on musicians come together. And it was a really nice, mix of energy and like being able to talk shop and revise joie de vivre.
So that's the music side of things. But you also got a little bit of an announcement for NeuroCreate. So tell us what happened with NeuroCreate.
So I would say about nearly a month ago, I was invited to Amsterdam to the World AI Summit as one of I not necessarily being synonymous, but essentially being the CEO of NeuroCreate. NeuroCreate was one of 5 startups to have been selected out of hundreds to essentially pitch in front of a rather nice jury of investors, I must say. We found out that we won the pitch, basically. So, Woo.
Yes, little fanfare. Well done. Phenomenal. So that's great. So there we go. The best AI company in the world, NeuroCreate. Just so you know,
it links to music. I actually performed at the end of the pitch. I bet you that's what made it stand out. So
wow.
Founders.
Fantastic. So that's what I need to start doing then. So go up to people, ask for money, then do. Yeah, that'll work.
You know, they get bang for their buck.
So, I've got an exciting week.
Yes, tell me, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been doing lots and lots of teaching, working with lots of companies. But on Thursday, my grand hardback book, How to Get to Great Ideas, which came out in 2018. Mm-hmm. 6 years later, it comes out in paperback on Thursday. So my book, because it continues to sell, apparently, it's coming out on paperback. So I am quite chuffed. And I had to rewrite a couple of bits in here. And one of them is actually sort of quite relevant to today. Mm-hmm. So there was a bit where I was talking about how humans over time are kind of like working together more and more. So every decade, there's 10% more collaboration when it comes to published papers and academic papers. And I postulated that back in 2018, that in the future, it may not just be collaborating with humans, it could be collaborating with machines. And that's happened. So I had to rewrite a little chunk of that. So that it was talking about what's happened rather than what might happen. And then another bit I had to rewrite. I only had to rewrite 2 bits. The other bit I had to rewrite is totally applicable to what we're going to be talking about today, which is the evolving concept of creativity and how this is an incredibly exciting time because our very definition of creativity will be changing.
Yes.
And I think that is quite an incredible moment to be living through. And I think that probably is a good point for us to introduce our brilliant guest for today.
Before you do, can I just say it's also incredible that you didn't have to change anything else. Like it's essentially a timeless book.
well, the brain hasn't changed hugely for the last 100,000 years.
But not yet. I mean, we are called the Silicon Synapse Show for a reason. How is AI affecting our brains? And in this case, we're talking about creativity as well. Did you know that there's also been papers that show the combination of AI and human are leading to more creative outputs than necessarily each on their own, which I think is quite interesting.
That's very interesting. I like that. Right. So I am going to play here. I think it can get the technology to work this time. So the first two shows, the technology hasn't worked. But I've spent a bit of time. As you might be able to see, I've actually got proper camera and proper microphone. Tap, tap. But I've got a little introduction here from ChatGPT, sarcastic and sassy ChatGPT, that's going to introduce our amazing guest. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Tim Boucher, the man who's turned letting robots do all the work into an art form. Tim's written over 100 books with AI, which honestly is like taking credit for baking just because you bought the bread. He's been covered by Newsweek, CNN, all those places that sound impressive, even though I'm pretty sure his laptop deserves at least half the credit. And when he's not letting tech do his heavy lifting, he's weaving baskets on his willow farm. Yes, because apparently even AI said, nah, man, that one's on you. Anyway, he's here tonight to explain why robot-written books are actually a grand statement against robots. Tim, take it away, as long as your AI doesn't upstage you.
So there we go, Tim. It wasn't the most complimentary introduction, but I think an amusing one. Nonetheless.
My first word, so it's okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. This is Tim. I believe it pronounced your surname wrong. Boucher is how you pronounce your surname.
Yeah.
But
Boucher,
it went for the mispronunciation that I imagine you get more than 50% of the time.
Yeah, but now that I live in Quebec, they don't mispronounce it anymore. So,
so Tim, you are known for having written over 100 AI books, and that has polarized opinions. But can you tell us a little bit about those books that you're writing, why you decided to start using AI to write books, and your general journey on that?
Well, I have a background in fine arts. I worked in technical theater for a long time, but I've also got, more recently than that, a background in content moderation and working in like policy capacities with tech companies. So as part of like a detox campaign of coming off of 5 years of content moderation salt mine work, I kind of just started exploring my own storytelling around a lot of the themes that I'd seen, like sort of the pseudo conspiracy stuff, or like the very weird, edgy kind of things, and just sort of like trying to understand them from an artistic background, and sort of like understand like, why do people tell stories like this, and what's it all for, and I've always, working in an operational capacity with tech companies and trying to figure out like this like trust and safety element. I've always believed in the power of what they call red teaming, where you basically try to simulate the techniques of an attacker, against a cyber system or whatever. And then because of that, you become sharpened in terms of like what you can defend against. So I've always tried to use products as they come out to see like, how could they be misused? How could they be pushed outside of their original purpose? Either negatively, or in a way, for my purposes, that's just more like creative exploration. So that's how I landed on AI tools, and I've been using them in a storytelling capacity for more like 4 or 5 years, but it's only taken off in the public eye in the past couple of years when I started doing short ebooks. And the ebooks generally range from about 2,000 to 5,000 words, which for some reason that makes people really mad. Because they don't think I'm allowed to use the word book for that, but it's like, it's an ebook, it's a document, it's like whatever you want to call it. Yeah. That's the length of the words. But then it also has between like usually like 40 and 200 images that sometimes they sort of illuminate the text or illustrate it, or sometimes they go against it, or sometimes they're just like a vibe thing. So all the volumes kind of like disjointedly tell stories in the same universe. They interreference one another. They're very like a hypertext sort of driven. thing where like each book will be about like one aspect of a given piece of world building, and then it will have like links out to other books, or other parts of the story where you can kind of like choose your own adventure and pick up, the next volume in that branch of the story if you want. So there's a lot of like kind of like hopping back and forth, and using AI tools has been really helpful for that, because it lets me like kind of like, okay, if I want to explore this branch of a tree of the story, I can kind of quickly go flesh out some details, and I can look at it and I can say like, well, is that right? Is that what I want or not? Change it a little bit. And then I can like leave that as an artifact, come back, make another one. And they all kind of like start to crisscross and reference each other, but they don't do that consistently. And that's part of what I like about working with the AI tools for this, is that, this hallucinatory factor where it just makes things up, or it forgets important details, or like later on, I've had it change like the gender of a character in the middle of a story, or the name of a character. I find those things and I'm like, wow, that's awesome, because me as a human writer, I would never think to screw up in those ways, like, so it becomes like this unique, interesting thing, this like process of discovery to find all these like flaws and artifacts, and then kind of like weave them in together, into this really weird, sometimes contradictory whole, and kind of like using this model of serial fiction and like old school sci-fi pulp, as an aesthetic to kind of like wrap all that around. So
so the whole thing that a lot of people would look at this and go, well, actually, if you were to do this well, you'd want it all to work together. You would want it to be consistent. You'd want to build the universe without these flaws. But you've embraced the flaws, and it's flaw as feature is kind of the approach that you've got.
Right. It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's like I'm using that as the primary thing in a way. I don't know if you've ever, this science fiction author, Philip K. Dick, he has this essay called like How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart 3 days Later. But like my universe is like constantly falling apart. It's like all these pieces are exploding, and it's like there's no there's no hope of holding it together, except for the journey that the reader takes is what ends up holding it together, and like what they decided to do, or what their reaction to it is, or what have you.
Sorry, Shama, on you go.
I was just going to say, would you say it's almost like a meta discourse on the use of AI in this case? It's just sort of like, look at how it's making it apart, and the snapshot in time as to like where it's at the moment, and how it's kind of being utilized as part of the journey here in terms of creating these series.
Absolutely. And it's the commentary is not all positive. Like people think like I'm some kind of like rah, let's go AI guy, but it's not really the case. Having worked for tech companies, I don't have like starry-eyed visions of like how great and perfectly visions get executed in reality. I know that it's often very messy, and that there are like real human impacts that someone has to deal with. And for much of my recent career, it has been me who has had to deal with those things. So when I look at AI, I don't just see this like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I see also like, wow, there's some really bad, dangerous stuff here, and we have to explore it. We have to talk about it. We have to make it. We have to make it known and visible in order to be able to explore it. And people are reacting to my work often very negatively because they, I think, haven't understood this context of what I'm doing, and they're just like looking at a headline that says, this guy made 100 books with AI and whatever. That's it. Like that's the extent of the discourse so far.
So my let's give people a bit of background about how we actually connected, Tim, because I do every week I release an AI generated newsletter, and it's unapologetically written by AI and not edited, and that's the way. So I create this, call it the Sassy Bot newsletter. And the Sassy Bot had picked up on an article that was critical of you. And it described you as the literary equivalent of fast food, I believe. And I thought nothing of this as the newsletter went out, as it does every week. And the next day, I get this email from, hey, it's the literary equivalent of fast food guy. And you got in touch with me to talk about it. And we had a chat, and I love your approach. I love your thinking. I love what you're doing. And it actually came from my sassy bots being critical of you that generated that conversation. And I love that it's gone from something that could have been negative to something that's very much positive. I love chatting to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to try to live life, is like when things happen to try to turn them into positive opportunities. It's not always possible, but it can sometimes work. So
yeah.
Thank you for picking up on
it. So you had mentioned sort of your approach is this sort of red teaming approach.
Yeah.
And there's something in there when you're talking about it. It's sort of similar to when I'm running innovation workshops. I've got this mantra in some of my workshops, which sounds a bit like fudge with shizzle. So which is what I ask people to do. It's like, don't use it. Don't follow the guidebook. Don't follow the rule book. Let's fudge with this shizzle to see what it can do to sort of push it to its limits, because that's when we start to discover the possibilities and the edges of this thing, and that I think is the most interesting area. And it's also something I talk about in this book that everyone should buy on Thursday. It's about the role of an innovator, because I would put you down as an innovator as much as an artist, and the role of an innovator to me is to be, if humanity is hacking their way through a forest, there's actually only a few people with machetes at the front that hack their way, and they find a clearing and they go, I found something interesting over here. Come on, people. And people follow them there. And if it's something good, then people will adopt it and humanity will have moved forward. Yeah. And that to me is like the job of an artist and an innovator. And I think that you really embody that in what you're doing, where you're experimenting and creating stuff.
That's a very nice compliment. I mean, hopefully those people aren't leading everyone to like a patch of poisonous berries,
which is also
a very real possibility,
I mean, that's what Mark Zuckerberg did, isn't it?
I mean, you just described the process of evolution, Dave. So
that's it. We are those organisms that sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. Sometimes we get lost, pruned by the evolutionary tree.
I mean, someone has to try the berries first, like.
Exactly.
And then there's that whole, like, those who know how to use AI will replace those who don't know how to use AI, etc. Right? And there's that kind of angle in that evolutionary, let's say, speak there. But like, are we saying that this is going to be something that's embedded into our genes? Who knows as we go forward, like how exactly to interact with something that is artificial in this case, but is often being mistaken for something that's trying to be human. Not really. So
yeah, this is something that I don't know if you use custom instructions on ChatGPT at all, but I have it set up where I require it to refer to itself not using personal pronouns or anthropomorphization. So it calls itself the system, and it refers to me. It refers to me as the user, and I found that like so much less intrusive mentally when I'm trying to do stuff, because it's like it's not constantly like, I'm sorry, Dave, you can't do that, or whatever. And it becomes more this like invisible tool instead of this like impersonation of a being that's trying to something, to me that I don't even know what it is. So like, I think there's a lot to unpack in all of this, and it's like, it's hard to even know where to start sometimes, but.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was teaching a big insurance company last night, and there's 500 people on this sort of Zoom meeting that I was doing a 3-hour workshop for. And one of the questions that I was asked at the end was about treating the AI like a human, and what my take on that was. And my take on it was, actually, I'm really conflicted with this, because I think it's really important that we understand that this is a piece of technology, it is a system, it is just a souped up text prediction machine.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's important that we understand that. However, the research also shows that you get better responses from it if you treat it like a human.
Right.
So it's like this thing where do you treat it like a human with this understanding that it's not a human? It becomes difficult because humans aren't wired that way to be able to keep that contradiction.
Yeah. But I think humans are wired to anthropomorphize anything.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at a webcam right now.
Yeah,
and it's got like 2 eyes. No, it doesn't. It's just it's just a webcam. And I think part of that's also with how it's been trained and like the system prompts behind the system prompts, for example. I mean, there was even some research that showed that ChatGPT seems to get crabby in winter. Which I think is quite interesting. It's like, well, has it got a personality? Well, not really, but maybe the kinds of like information that comes through that it was actually trained on, at this time of the year is just crabbier. Who knows? Right?
Well, there was that situation last December where they found that ChatGPT started giving us shorter responses and less quality responses. And somebody wondered, is that because it's just copying what humans do in December? So they put in the same prompt saying, it's June the 14th. And they put in a prompt. And then they would say, it's December the 12th. And they put in the prompt. And they discovered that it was something to do with the month of December. Because when they said that it was June, they get longer and better responses than they did in December. And these kind of things, because it's a black box and we've got no idea what's happening in there, that weird shit really intrigues me.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, is the margins, because I think there's so much artistic opportunity and creativity that can open up from kind of like exploring these anomalies instead of like trying to get the perfect technology, just being like, well, let's explore this imperfection and see where it takes us to.
Now, one of the things with criticism that you had from this, one of the things that happened to you is you were mentioned in a lawsuit against Anthropic, and it was been quite critical about your work. Could you explain what happened there?
Yeah, just to paraphrase, there's a lawsuit by, I think it's 3 primary authors who are suing Anthropic on claims of, I don't know the exact claim, but it's something like that Anthropic improperly used their book text as training material. So, that's fine if that's what they need to explore and find that answer for themselves. Feel like, I support that. But for whatever reason, within that argument, the legal team saw fit to include a bunch of statements of that, they are true in a certain context. They're not true in my context, but they said things like, there are many authors who are using AI to create sort of like knockoffs of famous authors' works, and then putting them up on Amazon, kind of impersonating the original author. And then a lot of times that will displace the actual author's books. And that's a huge problem. And Amazon really needs to solve that. And they've been slow to solve that. But I'm not doing that. I don't even sell on Amazon. I don't, like, my books are super niche thing. People might try to say that it's fast food, but it's not. It's like, it's a very specialty thing that only a few people are going to like, and that's not what fast food is. So in this statement, they basically sort of like called me they lumped me in with these people who are engaging in somewhat fraudulent behaviors of like mimicking the works of and the names of authors in order to sell their own books. And they used me as an illustration of that because I'm someone who got news coverage from Newsweek and other sources, openly talking about, like, this is what I do. I want to talk about it, I want to explore these issues out loud. And because of that, they sort of like decided to lump me in and try to like use me as a whipping post for their campaign, which that part I don't really agree with. I think they could have had a stronger argument had they just not included me. They included me for no reason. Like, I'm not a party to the lawsuit. So I ended up, as a result of that, just sending like an informal, semi-formal letter to the judge who has been assigned the case, and just being like, look, this is me. This is what I'm doing. I think what they've said about me here is incorrect. And if you're able to add this statement to the docket, just so it's part of the record, please do. I haven't had any communication back from the judge's team, nor from the legal team, or any of the others. But as a result of this, there was news coverage that came out in a major magazine that called me a fraudster because they sort of misread or read between the lines of what the lawsuit said. And I contacted them and they ended up correcting it and were cool about it. But I don't know what the upshot of that is.
So from that, what's your feeling about copyrighted works like this wonderful book here? What's your feeling about things like this that are copyrighted being put into the training data without recompense for the author? I will be completely open that I'm perfectly happy with my information being in the training data, and it is. So you can actually ask for some of the theories that I talk about, and it comes up in the training data and the answers. How do you feel about that? The whole idea of copyrighted works and public domain and stuff.
I'm of multiple minds about it. On the one hand, I think it's important for people who are creating culture to not be scared about sharing their contributions to like the benefit of humanity. And I know that within that, like we all want to be like compensated for our time and our creativity and our work and everything. But I also think like we need to just like once you put something out there, you just have to accept the fact that it's going to be taken all different kinds of ways, and some of those ways might be technical and they might be ways that you don't like. And we as creators need to figure out better solutions to these questions of like, how do you guide and govern your work once it's released and make sure that it's not misused or twisted or whatever. So I think those are all big problems. Like also there's a part of me that rebels against like copyright as an idea in the first place. I had a blog years ago where I had everything in the public domain in that blog. It's still up on the archive.org. And I wanted my work to be out there and whatever, but part of me has this rebellious reaction to the idea that copyright is sort of like a colonialism applied to the imagination. It's like it tries to take like human expression and then compartmentalize it into these like fenced off boxes where we charge people rent to access it. And it's like, I do it too because I'm selling ebooks and whatever, but that's part of a bigger set of like struggles that I have with it. But also I think like technically, I think it's just like in the US law, we're going to find that most likely judges are going to rule that it's fair use. And I think that also we need to like think more about like, if you start to require licensing for every single bit of every single piece of data, whatever, okay, some people might get paid for that, but the likelihood that they will be large corporations who are significant controllers of intellectual property is much greater than the likelihood of individual creators getting compensated directly from OpenAI for a blog post or something like that gets referenced. Probably we need solutions at every scale, sure. And I think that if we start to say that like fair use doesn't exist, doesn't apply anymore, then we're going to start to see that the only people who can afford to train AI are these huge companies, and it's going to just like reinforce monopolies both on the content side and on the technology side. So, I'm really in favor, honestly, of like, can we do like publicly funded AIs? Can we do things that are non-commercial, open source, whatever? And we need to be able to support those movements to be able to access data without making it prohibitively expensive that they can't even start, so it's, I think it's a really big, thorny problem from every side. I ended up submitting like to the US Copyright Office and Canadian Intellectual Property Office, a statement as an artist using AI of like generative AI, what my thoughts are and what my process is and all those things. I don't expect that they're going to listen to me because my position is pretty much counter to what theirs is currently. I'm much more in favor of the UK position, which I think it's since like 1988 or 87, the Copyright Act in the UK says that computer generated works can be copyrighted, and the copyright belongs to the person who I forget the exact words, but it's like undertook the arrangements to have the work created. It's like this is sort of like a work for hire situation. Or there's the Canadian Bar Association too. They recommended expanding a right that's usually applied to cinematographers as the maker of a film, because they undertook the arrangements to have the production created. So, coming from a theater background, like a lot of those things make sense, and coming from the background of, okay, I'm an author and I'm an artist, but when I work with AI, I'm working as a collaborator, but also as like a creative director. And it's like, these are my decisions that are causing this to come down the pipe. It's like, I'm the one that's paying for the subscription. It's all coming from the context of my life, from my work, from everything that brought me here. So
I think from that, you're sort of, there is something in the US law about, you cannot own something that's been generated by an algorithm, is basically what the US law says. At which point do you say it's generated by an algorithm? If you take something that was generated by ChatGPT and you start adding your own stuff to it, how much of it do you have to change to have legal ownership of it? And of course, there has to be a gray area, because gray areas are how lawyers pay for their next Mercedes.
And actually,
Carry on, Shama.
No, I was gonna say on that note, I think the entire kind of argument actually centers around what you've just said, which is money, right? In a sense, like I think people are very concerned about IP, whether copyright or patenting or whatever it is, because that was the currency in order to get paid for whatever you've invented or your idea or your artistic expression. So if that is no longer, I mean, it's just a question that we're throwing out there right now. So if that is no longer the actual currency in and of itself to make currency, AKA money, what other sort of form do you see apart from a new world order in terms of, that's the heart of capitalism at the moment. I make something, you pay me for what I've just made. So
copywriting and patenting is gone from being something that was there to reward the artist or the creator or the inventor and help them monetize what they do, to being something that is a corporate tool for protectioneering and for ring fencing. And so it's become a poison. It's totally changed what the initial dream was, and it's become a poison that stops innovation.
Exactly. So it used to be like a license, right? So, you create something, you get paid for it because people are meant to be honest in a sense. And, and that's why it's written in a way. So it's like a recipe book, right? You do it so that people can follow it and then pay you. But it's become in a way what Tim's talking about, which is like only the rich are able to protect if there's been a breach in a sense.
Yeah. Now, Tim, you don't just do digital stuff and AI stuff. Could you show us? You've got some stuff there. You've got some stuff to show us. A bit of show and tell here.
Yeah, I brought some show and tell items for the class today. This is a recent basket that I made because I really like nature stuff. I grow willow and I grow a bunch of other things. I practice what I think of as like wild cultivation, where I have a really big garden of about 60,000 square feet that it's intended as like to promote wildlife habitat. And I think of it as like biodiversity farming. Like I've worked a bit in organic agriculture, and I have the idea of like, what if there's a kind of farming that we could do that's emergent, that is like, our product is biodiversity. It's like restoring ecosystemic whatever. And so that's just something I'm exploring with. And I've engaged a lot with people who say like, I'm not a real artist because I use AI. And so, I think that's really interesting, and I'm not scared of that criticism. I think people throw that out at like it's like an atomic bomb and it's going to like blow my mind and ruin my life or something. But I think it's really a cool idea and a cool criticism, because it's led me to this idea of like, well, what is like the root of art? Like what is the root of creativity? Like, how do we know when we've created something, when we've exercised art? Like we talked about this, the US copyright law, they use this phrase, the creative spark. But it's basically like a magical term that nobody can really define. It's, as far as I can tell, it's not really defined in any laws. There's maybe like a judge commentary that used this phrase as though we all know what that means and we can all define that. So we don't even have to bother coming up with a clear explanation. And also they use this phrase of modicum of creativity. And so I've been trying to find like, where is the modicum? You know, like, can I isolate a single modicum of creativity and then, you know, like multiply that by 10 or attach it to another modicum or whatever?
Like a photon or something, you know, like a packet of energy. This is this packet of creativity.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been kind of like going back to first principles of like, and I have a 4-year-old kid too, so I've been like trying to teach him about like robots and stuff. So I've started to make like art robots, where this is like the most basic one of the art robots I can think of. It's like a platform with 4 wheels, 2 markers. It used to have 1 marker, but this is a big upgrade that I made. So, you know, I put this on the floor, I take off the caps, and I twist it around. And
Tim, what's your definition of a robot?
Right. So that's a question that I've wondered, you know, like, because I've gotten as a result of this kind of tinkering, I've gotten really into exploring like principles in mechanical engineering and understanding like what are the basic mechanisms and all this stuff. I don't have a working definition of that. I think of it more as like a fun word that I can use with my kid to like explore machines and stuff and processes and think about how things work and you know, and anthropomorphize them at the same time. So I don't have a perfect definition of that, but you know, another thing I've done is I don't know if you know what a wall plotter is. Like a lot of times people will use like Arduino and a bunch of electronics with like stepper motors and stuff. And they'll put like motors in corners of like a drawing area. And then there's like a device that holds a pen or whatever. And then it follows like X, Y coordinates from the computer to control, like make a drawing. So I've tried to take that idea and then I don't have it in here because it's in another room in my house, but I took that concept and I was like, well, what if I did that with no robot? You know, like what if the robot was me and it was like a totally low tech variation of this thing that I've only ever seen as a high tech thing. Like I've never seen anyone make a manual wall plotter. So like what I did was like I took what are they called? Like timing pulleys, or like pulleys with little, basically like gear teeth, and a timing belt. And I put those, I glued them to like 2 wooden wheels that I cut, and I put them into corners so that they're freely rotate. And then the timing belt holds a thing with like a marker. And then I can use that to make a drawing with a paint marker. So this is one prototype that I made of that I think is pretty cool. It's like this manual robot, low-tech robot, sort of like DIY wooden robot, where, you know, it's weird because it's such a weird sensation because it's still me that's drawing this thing, but when it comes out, it's like it's not by my hand, you know, like, and it shares elements of style and technique that I've been exploring. But when I see the texture on the surface, it's like it's me, but it's not me. So there's this really amazing sort of thing of like this, you know, have I reached the modicum yet or not? You know, like, and I have one last visual aid here that I've been working on, but have not yet perfected. So this is what is called a SCARA arm. It's a selective compliance something or other, whatever. But it's powered by hydraulic. So it has like water. So this is something that they use in like STEM classes a lot. I think in the US they call it that anyway, like science, technology, education, whatever. So it's got a pin attached to it. And when it's going to work, it's going to be able to actuate the pen mechanism and then the other joint in order to like draw stuff. But that's a work in progress. And I'm just trying to show sort of this context of like, you know, what I do, I'm not just sitting here on Midjourney, like you said, and typing a prompt and then calling it quits, you know, like my exploration is going a lot deeper than that. And it's been really super fun. Like I've been so excited about like learning all this stuff about like mechanical assemblages and understanding different types of robot arms, and then like just trying to make them out of like wood and like natural materials and kind of like blend this idea of like what's art, what's technology, what's nature, where does it all start and stop. Like I have another idea for a drawing machine that's like basically like attaching a cord or a few cords with like pulleys to some willow trees that catch a lot of breeze, you know,
Mm.
and then have the pulleys sort of like have the effect of like controlling a drawing mechanism somewhere else. So I could have like the trees are drawing what the wind is telling them, sort of stuff. And it's like, I guess I approach, you know, AI in the same kind of way as all of these things. You know, it's like, as a gardener, my sort of like motto or ethos or whatever, it's basically like plant a shit ton of trees. You know, like I just go out all the time and I take like whatever tree material I can get, cuttings, fruit, nuts, you know, seeds, and I'll just like plant them relentlessly. And I've got a hedgerow that I'm trying to install. You know, they don't all grow. They don't all come to fruition. They don't all succeed, but many of them do. You know, and that's how I approach AI also, and all these projects. And it's like,
it's great. You're fudging with shizzle. I like it.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a comment here that I want to bring up, because it starts with the 3 words, "Hear me out." So that makes it interesting right away. So hear me out. What if everything we create is art? Not only things we draw, paint, or shape with earth, such as clay. My not hard and fast belief is that if we create it, it's art, with the only difference being some art is useful. My phone is art, my fan is art, and my refrigerator is art. Anything we create is art by the mere fact that we created it. I could argue that the more useful creations are actually a higher art than things we can only look at. If that is the case, then we are merely, I'm not sure where it goes from there, but we're merely you. Now, what's your take on this, Tim? Because I feel there's a little bit of a flaw in this argument, because it falls into this binary thing of things are art or they're not art,
right,
which I think is a very dangerous area to be in. But what's your take on this comment?
I'm mostly in agreement with it. I guess, like, I think it's kind of the same question of like, what's nature and not nature. You know, it's like when we use technology, that ultimately the technology comes through us from the earth, you know, like minerals and materials and natural processes. Like, is that no longer natural merely because like we've touched it and made it? I don't think so. I think it's still natural. There might be good effects and bad effects from it, but like you said, there becomes like this risk of overbroad definitions that they sort of start to dissolve the problem in a way that, you know, can we get something good from exploring that definition or not? So that's kind of how I look at it. Like, what are the experimental results? What are the fruits that come from applying that philosophy, either temporarily or permanently? I mean, I pretty much agree that like most things are art, and I've been researching Theo Jansen, who is an artist. Is he?
Yeah, Theo Jansen. He's in Holland. Yeah, Netherlands.
Yeah, the
walking machines.
Beasts. Yeah, which they're like these. I sort of think of them almost as like biobots. Like they are. Yeah. They're made of like PVC pipes and some other materials, but they're powered by wind, and then because of the way the mechanical linkages work, he's got his own like mechanical linkage named after him, with certain measurements and proportions that, because of the shape of the arc that the foot makes, it allows the sculptures to sort of like look like not just look like, to actually walk over surfaces like a beach. And he says something like, you know, there's no difference ultimately between art and engineering. So I've kind of come more and more to that point of, you know, maybe it's true that this divide between like the fine arts, the high arts, and sort of like the crafts, you know, that if you make a bowl or you make a basket, like, you know, maybe that is better than a painting. I don't want to say it's better, like both have their place. But maybe there really is something to that, you know, the things that we can use are beautiful and amazing. Maybe they're art, maybe they're not art. I don't know. It could be on a case-by-case basis, or it could be on a perceiver-by-perceiver basis too.
There's like a traditional definition from academia as to what creativity is, which basically includes, is it novel? Is it something that elicits an affect, which in academic terms means, you know, some sort of surprise or emotion? And is it useful? And therefore, is the useful something that applies in the same way to lots of different things? Or is it, for example, value? And then value could be something that is, a piece of painting or whatever it is to look at as well. But I'd like to ask you as well, like, seeing as you are utilizing AI, let's say in one side of things which are quite digital, and then you've got, your physical side of things in terms of, all the robots that you're making and the weaving and stuff like that. Have you thought about bringing that hybridity into it and utilizing AI from that perspective? And also,
I mean, I have.
yeah. Go ahead.
Go.
I'm just going to say, like, do you think that AI itself has changed your creative process? This is like something that we're quite interested in terms of, like, it's the Silicon Synapse show at the end of the day. So it's like, how is AI actually changing the brain, or is it changing, your process in and of itself, apart from obviously how you've utilized it as a kind of a meta, statement in itself?
Mm-hmm. But yes, the first part, yes, I have tried to combine sort of like basket making and AI. There's like some of my books like sort of follow these themes of like weaving and there are a couple that are about like these like generation ships in outer space where the people who are on them are all, it's like a collective of artists, and they sort of don't know what their origins are, and what they spend their time doing is like weaving and reweaving like the pattern as they travel through space. So there's that, but also like recently I had the idea of like, well, what if I got AI to make generated gallery images, like as though I were showing my work in a gallery with like that combine like woven willow structures and combine like big data and projections and all this stuff. And I've got a couple of like really amazing image galleries that I made from that are like explorations of this fictitious art space of like, maybe one day I could make those things. I don't know. Like, and I've also used it to try to like prototype like some of these robot arms and stuff. But what I've seen that's really interesting is like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and the other ones. They don't get how mechanics work, and when you try to get them to depict mechanisms, it's like this crazy stuff that it's like if you tried to build it exactly as it showed you, it would never work. So that's fun. The second part I think was more about like creativity broadly. There's something that I think is important in this conversation, that what AI does for me as an artist using it is it sort of like it modulates or like relocates a little bit what I think of as the locus of the creative act. Like in certain contexts, the locus of the act might be like I'm here with a pencil on a piece of paper, and it's like I can see the thing that I'm drawing, with my hand, and it's there, and it's like my eye is, and I'm making decisions in my brain or whatever, and my body is having reactions to it. But when you're working with AI, the context sometimes is a step back from that. It's like you're taking this perspective of like the creative director or the cinematographer, or sort of an orchestral thing where you're taking all these bits from different pieces and like reweaving them,
like a collage.
And there was something I forget that we didn't really talk about in the copyright part, that they talk about in the US and Canada. I'm mix up a little bit which one is which, but they talk about like merely mechanical processes. So that's one of the things I've been trying to explore, is like, what is a merely mechanical process, and when is it merely or purely mechanical? And in Canada, I think they talk about like creativity being linked to an exercise of skill and judgment. And I think when you use AI systems, you absolutely are exercising skill and judgment all the time, totally, at every level of your interaction with them. And you're also exercising empathy, which I think is really important. I think empathy is a better basis for me to talk about it from than anthropomorphization. I don't want to attribute human-like qualities to non-human systems, because I think that leads us to dystopian outcomes of many and diverse types. But I think it's important to approach, AI and everything in life with empathy. So I can empathize with AI and think about how it works, and that becomes too its own kind of like intuitive exercise of skill and judgment. So I think all of those things are combined for me of like, what is this new shape of creativity that's emerging?
So there's something that it feels as if we're starting to get to a place that could be a huge conversation, and we'll need to wrap up in a minute. But
Yeah.
when it comes to creativity, I think what you're starting to unpick there is you've got taste and judgment that are really, really important for an artist. Whatever your art is, taste and judgment are so important. And then there's another element, is craft.
Yeah.
And you can have incredible craft, but no taste and judgment. You can have great taste and judgment, but you've not really got the craft skills. So which is actually, do you think, more important, creativity-wise, as an artist? Is it the taste and judgment, or is it the ability to have a craft? Because
I mean, I think creativity is. I think it's everything. I think you have to. Sorry, you were cutting out. I couldn't tell, but I think it's everything. It has to be holistic. It has to be both. I think you have to exercise both sides of your brain. You know, the analytical side and the creative side, in order to really bring anything into fruition in the world. So I don't think one it's more important than the other. And I think it's also interesting that some people are really good at getting results from generative AI systems, and some people are less good, or they get less interesting or diverse or original results. So even just that as a proof tells us there is something else there, that it goes beyond merely a mechanical process. You know, like there's something else that's being applied. That again, it's immeasurable. But you know, it's one thing that's funny for me as an artist. Like when we talk about it from the copyright side, is like, you know, I guess like really, I reject the idea that a bureaucrat and a lawyer sitting around have greater authority over my art and my creative process to tell me when is something creative enough. You know, like I don't think that's a great or just outcome. I think that the Canadian system is interesting and different for this reason, because the Intellectual Property Office, they don't review or assess the contents of submissions. It's basically more like a timestamp with a registration number and whatever it is that you listed on there. And then down the road, if there's an issue, it goes to court to interpret it. But
yeah, right. I think this is probably a good place for us to wrap things up. We could talk about this stuff, which is always great. But I want to, Tim, give you an opportunity to tell people where to find your stuff. So, you know, that is you right there. But this is your site with your books on it. Can you tell us a little bit more just about?
Yeah. So if you go to lostbooks.ca, that's just sort of the publishing hub of my work, and you can see links to you know, both my ebooks that have used AI assisted elements, and also books that I've written just as myself using regular writing. I don't know what we call that now, but and then also my blog. You know, like I write almost every day, just about things that I come across online, and AI stuff and art stuff, and the mix of the two. And I only blog now. I don't go really on social media anymore. I was a blogger back in the old days of blogging from like 2003. I kept a blog for a long time, about 8 or 9 years. And I've gone back to that as like sort of a happier, more wholesome version of the internet. And it's like, if I find stuff on social media, I respond to it on my blog. And if people want to write me or send an email or whatever, go ahead.
So that's great, because Gary Ennis has given us a comment here saying, Tim, not time, but Tim's got hundreds of books. Has he written one giving his thoughts and all this stuff? And I guess that's really what your blog is.
Right. That's what my blog is. Yeah.
So there you go, Tim. That we can get
the blog
Gary to go along there.
The blog is linked from there, but it's just my name, timboucher.ca. So BOUCHER.ca.
Brilliant. And
what's
that?
You got to start a Substack and monetize your blogs.
I've worked for platforms, and I have platformitis. I don't want to deal with any platform that I don't own,
Yeah.
and that I can't control in the way that I want it to be. I've just seen like the endless chase of that game of like, let's monetize a Substack. Let's, it's like, and it's, I get it. I know that's the way people reach people, but it's not the way that I'm choosing to reach people. So
brilliant. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time, and for sharing your thoughts on this. I think there's some really interesting areas here, and it's only going to develop and evolve as time goes on and as these AI tools become more ubiquitous. But thank you so much again, and everyone go and check out Tim's stuff. And Shama and I will be back in about 3 weeks' time, I believe, and we will see you then. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, Shama, and thank you everyone who's been watching.
Thank you.
Cheerio.